Double Dragon was a video game powerhouse in the late 80s, ushering in a golden era of beat-em-ups. It was a prominent feature in the 1989 movie The Wizard.
You got 50,000 on Double Dragon?
Got its own feature in 1994.
You said it.
And an animated series that started in 1993 and ran for two 13-episode seasons. It goes without saying it was hot in arcades and on home consoles, and the series continues to have some nostalgic staying power today, with the most recent release being Double Dragon Gaiden: Rise of the Dragons in 2023. But Double Dragon is a side-scrolling brawler, not a fighting game. Why am I covering it on Violent Profiles? Well, first of all, it's my show and I can do what I want. But the more honest answer is that there were two Double Dragon fighting games released in 94 and 95. One based on the animated series and developed by Leland Interactive Media, and one based on the movie and developed by the creators of the franchise Technos Japan. It was, in fact, the final game in the series by Technos before they went out of business. These will be our focuses for today, for better or worse. That's right, our very own Double Dragon double feature. My own experiences with these titles vary, but I recall being enthusiastic about the world, its lore, and most importantly, the characters. I'm Eric J. Chucky, and welcome to Violent Profiles, where we discuss obscure fighting games and the rosters that define them. Before we live the code of the dragon, I'd be honored if you dive-kick the like button of the dragon, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already of the dragon, and share the video around with your friends of the dragon. Word of mouth is a powerful tool to get more eyes on this channel, and everything else feeds that mean old algorithm. The algorithm of the dragon. In case you haven't guessed, we're covering Double Dragon 5 The Shadow Falls first, a 1994 title published by Tradewest on the SNES, Genesis, and eventually the Atari Jaguar to mixed reviews. The differences between the big two are fairly negligible, and despite the quote-unquote sweat replacing blood, we'll be playing the SNES version today because I prefer its graphics, while using the Genesis music because y'all know how much I dig those fuzzy sound fonts. The Jaguar version, it wasn't good. I'm going to try to stick to the context of these individual games as much as possible, which is difficult because I already have a bunch of questions and you guys know how much I love shrugging, man. But there's a lot of lore and variant timelines in the Double Dragon cinematic universe. It would take forever and be overly nitpicky if I spent a lot of time comparing these games to the rest of the franchise. I might cover the Double Dragon TV series in the distant future though. Once we run out of relevant fighting games, I've got to talk about something, and having rewatched a few episodes for research, it's full of ridiculous characters worth exploring on this show. And it's a good thing I did do that research because the story offered by the game is incredibly bare bones. You get no prompt on starting tournament mode, and quest mode gives you a generic Shadow Master is making an evil virus / fight to be the coolest guy in Shadow Master's gang storyline depending on who you pick, with generic endings to match. There are individual endings in tournament mode though, and character biographies as well, though those tell us more about the fighters as people than their role in the continuity. I guess if you want to know more, watch the show, or encourage me to get to it sooner with your likes, comments, and subscribes. Before we dive into the actual roster, I have to shout out the manual, which is presented like a comic book where Bimmy, Jimmy, and the villains discuss how to play the game. The effort they put into this thing is spectacular. There's even slightly different art when appropriate depending on your system of choice. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it isn't that entertaining and I don't need to pad out this video, but if you think that it's as neat as I do, give it a Google and track down a PDF to read on your own. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the twins Billy and Jimmy Lee, product of the union between the Chinese Lee clan and the Virginian Lee family. Separated at birth, dark-haired Billy in blue train under the oldest dragon, the geriatric stereotype who tells you to kick villainous butt in the Brothers Quest mode intro. Apparently, he can sing, likes to dance, enjoys a tall, frothy glass of milk, and is especially proud of his extensive cowboy boot collection. Wait, hang on, what exactly is going on in the background of this stage? Why do those rats look like small kangaroos? What's with Homeless Shaq and the ghost of a bank manager from Cowboy Times? Why are they, of all people, in the sewer? Anyhow, should Billy be the man to trounce the Shadow Master, he dedicates the rest of his life to training the next generation of Dragon Masters. Blonde Jimmy with the red jumpsuit, however, is described by the manual as annoying and having a runaway mouth. He's characterized as being vain and hot-headed, which makes sense for a self-described gamer who hates nothing more than a bad hair day. Perhaps this is a product of him being trained not by the Dragon Master, but the sinister Shadow Master. Should he find victory in the tournament, he is pleased to make it in time to meet his planned date with the greatest drag queen of the 1980s. I'm not judging, I just calls them like I sees them. The brothers are clones of each other mechanically, with a few super minor differences. Jimmy's Shadow Dragon style throws a fireball, while Billy's Art of the Dragon shoots a spirit dragon out of his chest that electrifies you, for example. It's my urge here to call them all-rounders because they're Shoto clones, what with the Shoryuken, and the spinning kick that looks less like Ken and Ryu's than in the previous titles. So that's clearly the vibe, but Double Dragon 5 allows you to modify your character's stats before you throw down, so their actual stats are up to you. The special moves aren't really worth investing in though, most of them take too long to start up and the CPU reads your inputs like a dirty cheater. Every fighter has a decent mix of ranges to their normals, light, medium, and heavy attack options at varying speeds, and most of the animations are unique, so it's hard to say any one roster member has advantage over the others. These are the only heroic characters in the game, however, which is weird. Staple of the series, Marion is a character in the cartoon, a cop who deputizes the Lee brothers, which gives them license to perform Chuck Norris karate against the various mooks of the Shadow Warriors gang without recourse. They also recruit a number of friends throughout the series to be part of their stable, that's the Dragon Warriors, but none of them are represented here. You'd think a game targeted at children and based so unapologetically off of Street Fighter would have more good guys on the roster. But here we are. On to the villains. After everything I said about most folks' normals being pretty good, I'm gonna immediately contradict myself. Jawbreaker sucks. The reach of his Chuzitsu fighting style is so short for everything but his crouching heavy punch, which is a big long tongue attack with a stock slurp noise every time you use it. He's got a burp shockwave, a spiky loogie, and a flying headbutt that the opponent is too constantly in my grill to show off properly. Jawbreaker hails from the Midwestern United States and is thus a big eater, as in trailer hitches and bungee cords. He dislikes flossing, which I assume is referring to the dance craze, because if you beat the game with him, you see he retires from a life of organized crime to become a dentist.
You'll be a dentist. You have a talent for causing things.
Sickle developed his own weapons, these almost wing-like, arm-length curved and serrated blades he employs in his Su-Gin style. That's Ginsu switched around. They were fancy TV order knives back in the 90s. The reference was very funny at the time, I assure you. The manual says he does it because he hates untidy coiffs, but, you know, actually I'm gonna go ahead and look it up. Oh, yep. In his ending, he opens a fashion salon where he gives everyone his signature haircut. Okay, sure. He dresses like a reject from The Running Man and has a face almost as impressively white as Jawbreaker's. He enjoys long walks in the rain and spends endless hours at his grinding wheel sharpening his blades. His favorite movie is Edward Scissorhands, he likes styling moose, and hates dull knives. Am I meant to be choosing one of these characters to date? I enjoyed playing Sickle in-game. He has some of the smoothest animations, and he's really quick, which does his mostly short range a lot of favors. Fast startup on his animations, a good variety of moves where he throws his blades or turns into a buzzsaw. I approve. Our next fighter is 100% the kind of guy I drew in the margin of my math test in middle school. He's got an eye patch, a cyborg jaw, camo pants, and one big claw on each hand. If you put every fighting game roster into a blender, this is the guy who would come out. His name is Blade. No, not that one. Not that one either. Nope, no, not him. Nope. Nope. No. Oh, wait, that's the guy. He's got a couple of good dash moves and an E-Honda 100-hand slap style slice and dice move, but I mostly use jump attacks and crouching hard punch, which is a keen little slide stab. Slide stab. A cyborg since the war, this Parisian native loves a good gourmet dinner. Though his heart has been replaced by technology rendering him cold and unfeeling toward the art of killing, the man has shed tears over a perfectly set souffle. As you'd expect, he hates fast food, and his ending sees him turning into Sergeant Slaughter for some reason to open a kebab restaurant. On a final note about Blade, I think it's bold to have two guys in the game whose gimmick is arm knives, and yet they still manage to make them so different. Kudos, Double Dragon 5. Ah, come on! Seika is our next fighter, and she practices Reboot Fu and has a little bit of Mortal Kombat ninja in her, but, I mean, come on. That's just Girl Blade. At least her personality is different. I'm gathering she's intended to be a bit of a valley girl, Silicon in this instance, as she likes talk shows and hates infomercials. And as for her bio, well, I'll just read this one word for word. Despite two loving parents, Seiko was not a normal kid. Kept an extensive collection of pet rocks. Years of ridicule from other kids led her to develop a skin so thick that it eventually evolved into armor plating. She also became adept at martial arts but sustained many injuries, which led her to acquire several bionic prostheses. She does her own hair. This seems at odds with the rest of her bio and ending, where she gets discovered at the mall and becomes a TV talk show host. Thankfully, she's a pretty good fighter to control with her own human torpedo move, that guy from Street Fighter's claw roll, and Chun-Li's spinning bird kick. But if I'm being real, most of the time when I want to fight with her, it was by using a move I began referring to as the butt kick. I'll let you figure out why on your own. This seems like as good a time as any to bring up that the game has no chip damage. Maybe it was for stuff like this, but I would have rather had an option for some kind of progress when the computer is engaging its ability to input read my attacks and block with split-second timing. The character I was most hyped to play as a kid was Bones, a cackling skeleton with a machine gun who had a cobra tattoo on his forehead and bitchin' shades. His favorite song is the 50s classic Shake, Rattle, and Roll by Big Joe Turner. He hates dogs, and he's a huge fan of Marilyn Monroe. Okay, the manual calls her Marilyn Monroe for the pun, but I chose to ignore that in favor of believing Bones is a man of many facets. All this is especially interesting given he was originally a valet to King Sargon II, a real-life Assyrian monarch in the late 700s. I'm not doing any more research into him than that, just weird that they used a real-life king but gave Marilyn Monroe a made-up pun name. Bones has some decent reach, but his specials aren't worth using. They put so much effort into making this move where he lifts up his sunglasses to shoot lasers from his eyes look cool that they forgot he's probably going to get kicked in the face before any lasers come out, and most other projectiles outspeed it. Still, I managed to beat a few rounds with him, so it's conceivable one might win the tournament mode with him and discover his fate as a rock star, having traded in his gun for a guitar. It's also perhaps worth noting that the previous three characters, Blade, Seika, and Bones, were not in the TV show. Blade is based on the generic Shadow Warrior foot soldiers, but otherwise they're completely original creations of the game, which sucks because I was really hoping for some context on what the hell is going on with Seika's personality and backstory. I know game development takes a while, so they probably weren't working with a full roster of characters from the show, but Marion was in the first episode and features prominently in the rest of the series, and is a Double Dragon staple. Abobo and Wild Willie are also in the first episode, though they get phantom zoned into a magic prison wall at the start of the second one, but I'm sure including a couple of characters for fans of the original game series would have been received well even if they weren't prominent in the cartoon. Next up is another why didn't they use a different character from the show entry, Countdown. I only watched the first few episodes for my research, so I actually thought this was a character established as an ally of the Lees early on, Blaster. I was wondering for a bit why he was being portrayed as evil, only to find out he had some kind of opposite number voiced by the same dude who shows up later. Go figure. Countdown is from New Orleans, plays accordion in a Zydeco band, was assembled on the last night of Mardi Gras, and is a big fan of the holiday. That's right, you guessed it, New Year's Eve. He really hates getting his eyes tested at the DMV. And that's probably a joke about his laser eye, whose projectile is faster with less startup time than Bones, but I choose to believe he just dislikes bureaucracy. This factory reject from the infamous Baton Rouge Bionics lab somehow got mailed to a certain low-profile California game company where he could be heard muttering, "The only way to be sure is to nuke the site from orbit." Now he's in Metro City using a fighting style the manual calls Dissin, which basically means he's an anti-air machine with his various missile specials and has some okay normals. Should he find success in tournament mode, Countdown accidentally enters a local science fair and wins that too, granting him attendance to a university for rocket science. Ice Pick is a cool customer from Nome, Alaska, who brings inspiration from the likes of Bobby Drake, along with a fondness for chocolate-covered vanilla ice cream bars and a distaste for global warming. He's an avid skier and makes the best homemade ice cream, apparently. Why are these the details included in the bios? Tired of being accused of unfeeling, distant behavior, Ice Pick only wants to be able to share physical affection with those he cares deeply for, but cannot because of his sub-zero touch. He doesn't get that if he wins, though. This tournament doesn't have any wishes or ultimate power or whatever on the line. Metro City just suffers a record winner sometime after his victory, and Ice Pick has some fun out in the snow. Following the introduction of Mortal Kombat's Sub-Zero into the world, most fighting games understood you should probably have a Sub-Zero. Double Dragon 5 chose to give their Sub-Zero a sword, and I am generally in favor of this decision, but calling his style Ice Kido is a bit of a stretch. Our last main roster character is Trigger Happy, a lock-and-load fighter from Barstow, California. He loves pyrotechnics, projectiles, Kevlar armored fabric, and knitting. His most prized possession is a gold-plated nail gun awarded to him by the Metro City Carpenters Union. He loves his crew cut, hates ballet, and if you beat the game with him, he starts his own construction company to restore Metro City. Are the bad guys in this actually bad guys? Trigger Happy's got probably the best specials in the game, but I'm not blown up by his normals, except maybe his crouching hard kick with the stanky leg. That's abusable. Shout out to Matthew Perry here in the background of the stage. R.I.P. Bingaling. Two more and then we can move on to the other game. These ones are unlocked via cheat code. Dominique the mini-boss is another completely new addition, though she does fit the vibe of the standard Double Dragon universe with an extremely loose resemblance to series staple Linda Lash. I'm sure you can work out how Dominique wasn't a character in the original children's cartoon show. The manual makes a lot of giggling references to spandex, working out, and a popular comeback from strong, confident women in the mid-90s that reached what was probably its highest popularity in the 1996 Pamela Anderson vehicle Barbed Wire.
Don't call me babe.
1996 is clearly after 1994, and I don't feel like doing the research to discover what kinky fitness vixen the devs were alluding to here, so I guess it'll remain a mystery for now. Dominique is from the Bronx, fights dirty, and hates Flab. Good lord. She uses her whip, some stiletto kicks, a spinning sweep move that leaves you in the worst position, and she can shoot lasers from her ponytail. You can't use her or the Shadow Master in quest mode, but they're fair game in versus and tournament play. Beat the game with her and she becomes a phys ed teacher, though she keeps the mask. That seems unprofessional. Finally, the villain of the show and final boss of the game, Shadow Master. And after all this ridiculous BS, they actually do a character justice. He loves the nightlife, hates daytime TV, he is from your nightmares, and employs the art of the shadow as his fighting style. The manual calls him evil incarnate, and claims he's personally responsible for the Black Plague, both world wars and the current healthcare crisis in the US. That's the manual's joke, not mine, even if I echo the sentiment here 30 years later. Shadowmaster is feared for how easily he can twist intelligent folk to his wicked whims, and if you finish the fight with him, he takes over the city and darkness reigns. Hell yeah! He's also the best character in the game. Good reach, quick attacks, a couple of solid projectiles, and a multi-directional teleport. Compared to the rest of the roster, that makes him seem OP, which is good for your final boss. But if everyone were more like him, I think the game would be held in higher regard to this day. Is Double Dragon 5 a bad game? No, I've played a hell of a lot worse on this show, and it was Leland Interactive Media's first fighting game. Not bad for that maiden voyage. As much as I ragged on the original characters for being original, they're pretty well designed from a visual standpoint, especially Bones. A lot of the animations are really smooth, and Shadowmaster even gets one hell of a glow up with his armor over the skin-tight bodysuit TV show version. The stages are lively enough for the era, and then there's the fatalities that occur if you finish your opponent with the correct type of strike. The one where Dominique turns into worms or sausages or whatever in particular stuck with me since I first saw it as a kid. Wild stuff, but wild doesn't necessarily mean good. For that, I am told, we turn to the SNK-published Double Dragon. A confusing title for the 1995 fighting game when trying to differentiate it from the original. Most fans call it Double Dragon 95, and while I want to talk about it on this show for reasons, it doesn't have the kind of character support we usually feature. That is to say, I can't find the manual online, and what bio details persist or light at best. I'm guessing that's just how it is. I wouldn't cover this game on its own, hence the double feature. So, this will be brief, but let's dive in. Firstly, if you haven't seen the 1994 Double Dragon movie and you don't mind the mediocre cheese of a 90s children's action film, give it a watch. Some good jokes, fun premises, and decent acting, especially from Robert Patrick, who plays the villain, Kogashuko, and devours the scenery with quotable lines. Some things are lost in translation from movie to game, probably intentionally, but there are also similarities too clear to be coincidental, like the stage at the flooded Grauman's Chinese Theater and the one where the dragon wagon crashes in the alleyway. Some of the win quotes are lines from the movie, and of course, there's the presence of clips in the attract mode and still images in the Power Core arcade. That said, the plot is completely different from the outset. Our heroes are invited back to their hometown after 10 years, a world of, and I quote, weak meat and strong food, to defeat the man who caused this chaos and polluted the city. Apparently this place is called Bloody Town. I don't know if it was always called Bloody Town, or if this was a recent change, or who thought this was a good idea. But what about the characters? Not only are the bios thin, but so are the endings, and they're both baffling and poorly translated to boot, so bear with me. Billy and Jimmy Lee both feature, of course. If we're following movie continuity, the brothers weren't separated at birth. Billy is the younger, more brash of the two, and Jimmy is more responsible. We very well might be, since just like in the film, they each have a transformation sequence that puts them in classy-looking red and blue geese, and changes the background music to the tune we're listening to right now. Should they win, Billy is too stupid to realize his master has died, a fact which nobody bothers to address as Billy enthusiastically announces his intentions to continue practicing Sosatsuken, and Jimmy laments that the presence of the dragon medallions will perpetually bring wicked new challengers seeking their power. Oh, that's a big point in the film. Kogashuko is looking to attain ultimate power by uniting two halves of a dragon medallion, one which he recently acquired that gives him shadow powers, and the other which is in the hand of Lee's. They don't really address this until just before you fight Shuko in the game. I guess they expected you to have seen the movie or something? Speaking of, Shuko and his second-in-command Duke are the bosses of the game, only unlocked to the code, who don't really have endings except for cackling about their victories. They're evil, they're trying to take over the world. The former is from the movie, and I mean, it's a decent interpretation. I don't know why you wouldn't go for Robert Patrick's signature white blonde hair, but it's about as close as you'd get back in the day when this was done the other way around. The latter, however, is not in the film, but he is the antagonist of the SNES game Super Double Dragon with some significant ties to the Lees, so clearly the intention with some of the roster was to pay homage to those characters that mean a lot to the fans. Oh wait, no, fully 4 of the fighters in this game have nothing to do with the movie or the rest of the franchise either. I guess that's something to link these two games to one another. Cheng Fu is the drunken master who mistakenly wandered into all this Kogashuko business. He talks a big game about avenging his own master, but against what it's not for certain since his master is alive and well, comedically disciplining him in his ending. Eddie Jenkins made up his own fighting style by joining Muay Thai with other martial arts techniques and was hired to teach this to Kogashuko's soldiers. If this just sounds like MMA to you, you'd probably be correct, but this man is very tall and I have witnessed the power of Shaq Fu, so I'm not going to be the one to argue with him. Is he the guy in the sewer from earlier? He might be based on Tower, a bit part minion from the film, but I'm really reaching there. Win the game with him and he says a bunch of gibberish that I think is meant to imply he's taken down Shuko's empire and declared himself the King of Kings. Our next fighter is the Italian man with 2 Irish names, Patrick Dalton. He's a street fighter searching for ever greater challenges, which leads him to Kogashuko. Should he batter the former Victor Giesman, he wanders off again to continue his search. Then there's Amon, the ninja who crossed the ocean in search of his missing family. He's a ninja. The fanwiki says he's based off of another ninja from the games, but they don't have the same name or motivations, so I think that's just what ninjas look like in the Double Dragon extended universe. If you help him confront Koga Shuko so he can demand his family's whereabouts, Shuko tells Amon that he is a fool and they are already dead, asking him if revenge truly tastes as sweet when one does not even know that they are claiming it before breathing his final breath. Nah, I'm kidding. He climbs into his Formula 1 race car and sees an image of Jesus descending from the heavens while characters from Voltage Fighter Go Kaiser look on in bikini-clad neutrality. The final OC of this game is Rebecca, whose father was a martial arts instructor. She was in love with a man named Eric, whom she discovered was one of Koga Shuko's spies and defeated him in combat. Should she be victorious, she engages in her preferred lifestyle as some sort of debutante or socialite, coyly accepting invitations from strange men to fight her. One could argue she serves as an analog to Satori Yamada from the movie, who was both teacher and guardian to the Lees and hinted to have once had a love affair with the man who now calls himself Koga Shuko. But again, I'm grasping at straws. I will say her in-game sprite bears an interesting resemblance to Asuka from the SNES TMNT Tournament Fighters, a character who was similarly supposed to be Mitsu, a significant female character in the third film. Are they connected?
Of course not, don't be ridiculous.
I can also pretend the metal-capped slab of beef from the movie known as Torpedo is being represented by Double Dragon staple Burnov, an overweight fire-breathing pro wrestler and rock star. He calls himself Bloody Meat Bomb. I don't know what else to say about this guy. Let's end a little stronger. Typical damsel in distress Marion Kelly goes by the name Marion Delario here and is a playable fighter, but that's basically the beginning and end of her similarity to the female leader of the Power Corps from the film. If you use her to finish Koga Shuko, she looks at a bunch of jewelry at the store and talks about selling the dragon medallions, which doesn't make much sense in any continuity. Finally, probably the most satisfying addition of the roster is series mainstay Abobo, here as Bo Abobo. He definitely draws more from his Double Dragon movie appearance with the mohawk and face paint, as opposed to the traditional shaved head and handlebar mustache that make him look like either Bald Bull or Steve Harvey living a double life. He even inflates with super steroid power during some of his moves and poses. If you choose to win the game with him, he gets some lunch, and demands meat that will make his teeth bleed. Even after reading that out loud, my biggest question mark with this interpretation is not that they skipped out on potential fighters like Huey, Lewis, or Michael Berryman's character, but that they didn't include Linda Lash. Remember her from before, when we were talking about Dominique? Oh, I know that's not what you remember about Dominique. Lash is a character who has been in the games from the beginning, featured as Koga Shuko's right hand in the film, and would have had a fun and interesting moveset with her whip, but she's overlooked in favor of a bunch of random nobodies. Weird call. I played Double Dragon 2 a fair amount as a kid and always loved Battletoads and Double Dragon on the SNES. I recall watching a little bit of the cartoon and finding it bad. My dad took me to see the movie in theaters, which I enjoyed, and Double Dragon 5 was a one-time rental. I clearly remember being in the cab of my stepdad's truck on the ride home, annoying him and my mother by excitedly reading excerpts from the manual out loud. I wonder if they ever questioned why I never brought it up again after the rental. Perhaps they knew. Sometimes, parents understand much more than you think. I played Double Dragon 95 for the first time in doing research for this video, and it is better than The Shadow Falls, but I don't know if it's quite as amazing as the internet would have you believe. It certainly doesn't feel as solid as anything in the Gokutsuji series, for example. I'm glad the franchise is making a return to the fore, however. I hope we keep seeing more from the Lee brothers, and who knows, maybe we'll even get another cheesy action movie someday in the vein of Kung Fury. We can always dream. Next time on Violent Profiles, we will not be talking about a fighting game. But don't worry. There will still be violence, and there will still be profiles. If you speed over to our Patreon and sub at the $5 tier, you can join the illustrious legacy of all the names on screen and get that episode a whole month early. Not to mention immediately becoming cool. Cooler than Koga Shuko. He doesn't give me $5, I'll tell you that much. Until next time, white out.